Welcome to Still Speak Podcast today. I hope you're doing well. I want to start a series about the conviction of a young girl named Kaitlyn Conley. Since I first heard of this story about a year or two ago, I have not been able to get it out of my head. It's really fascinating and riveting type of story, but it's also a rare story because most of the siblings of the victim and most, or a few, of the family members of the victim do not, I repeat, do not believe Kaitlyn Conley is guilty of murdering their sister. And many of the siblings have actually been advocating and fighting for Kaitlyn alongside her parents to get her free. We don't see many cases like that where family members of the victim do not believe the person, arrested, charged, tried, and convicted is the one who is actually guilty. So it really caught my attention because I was like, wow, you don't see this often. Now, I'm going to just do a basic story. This is going to be less than 20 minutes. I'm going to introduce you to Kaitlyn. I'm going to introduce you to Mary, the basics of the story, and then I'm going to kind of leave you on a cliffhanger. So, Kaitlyn is 28 years old. Her birthday was in April 9th of this year. She's currently incarcerated after being convicted of manslaughter in Oneida County, New York on November 6th of 2017. The DA definitely attempted to paint her as this devious, cold, vindictive murderer. To be honest with you, I don't think they did a good job of that. However, she ended up being convicted. Now, one of the sisters of the victim has a website in support of Katie, fighting for her, advocating for her, and there's also a Facebook page called Free Kaitlyn Conley. On the website of, from the sister of the victim, it says the following about Katie. It says, quote, Katie is a loving sister, aunt, daughter, cousin, niece, and friend to many. One of 4 daughters, Katie has always been surrounded by a close and devoted family. As a daughter of a former Army major, Katie has been raised with values and morals which include respect, honor, hard work, trustworthiness, and kindness. Katie has often been described as smart and driven. She was an avid tennis player, playing competitively both at the high school and college level. After graduating from high school, in the top 10% of her class, she moved on to get an associate's degree from Mohawk Valley Community College in liberal arts. Following that degree, she continued taking classes from both Utica College and State of New York Polytechnic Institute, receiving her bachelor's degree in business in May of 2016, and finishing her final semester with a 4.0 average. She has been invited into the National Honor Society both in high school and in college. In addition to being a full-time college student and maintaining an impressive GPA, Katie also stayed busy working at Family Chiropractic Care as an office manager, managing billing and scheduling, running the front desk, and of course attending to the daily needs of the business. After shifts at the office, Katie also cared for an elderly woman and spent hours each evening cleaning, cooking, shopping, and running errands for her. She was also an entrepreneur running her own painting business. She is a practicing Catholic and a member of Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church in Utica. From a young age, Katie has always had a soft spot in her heart for animals. Over the years, Katie has rescued many of them and given them a loving home. Her collection of rescue animals includes horses, chickens, goats, a donkey, and cats. It was not unusual for her to spend hours outside caring for them. She was also an avid traveler, having traveled to Ireland, Germany, Bahamas, Canada, and across America in several cross-country road trips. Anyone who knows Katie can attest to her kind, generous soul. Friends describe Katie as being witty, supportive, friendly, and outgoing. She was, always there to make someone smile, always willing to help, and that is how she was raised. To say she is strong is an understatement. Katie has been adamant of her innocence regarding this matter. She loved Dr. Maryyoder, and it breaks her heart to know that the truth has not come out. An injustice for Katie does not equate to justice for Maryyoder, unquote. Well, Katie did a lot more than I ever did. And I'm a good, 10, 12 years older than her. Man, oh man. Goodness, she had a lot going on there. I want to note, because this is an important part of the story, that Kaitlyn, while working at the chiropractic clinic run by Mary and her husband Bill, did have a on-again, off-again type of dating relationship with their son, Adam Yoder. She worked at their chiropractic clinic for 4 years before the death of Mary. Kaitlyn was just 22 years old when her 60-year-old boss died. Now, Mary Yoder, at the time of the crime, by all accounts, was described as a healthy wife and mother, and in addition to being a chiropractor, that, she owned her own business, that it was a thriving practice in New York with her husband, Dr. William Yoder, for 30 years. And she suddenly and violently became ill in 2015, and originally it was suspected that it was a stomach bug. Mary Yoder did have 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. I am not going to mention the daughters' names. They're out there, but I'm not going to do that. I want to maintain their privacy. However, I have to tell you the son's name, which is Adam, because he is a big part of this story. I cannot leave him out of the story, and therefore I have to say his name. She had 7 siblings. 5 of them were sisters, and 2 of them were brothers. Yoder became ill on Sunday, July 20th of 2015 after seeing patients in her clinic that day. And she wasn't able to, shake what was making her ill, so she ended up going home early at about 4:30 p.m. on July 20th of 2015. She didn't know what she was sick from, but she did have excessive diarrhea and vomiting. And part of her chiropractic practice included a belief in holistic medicine and herbal supplements, and she even grew her own herbs in her home garden. And as somebody who loves holistic and natural type stuff, I love it. Mary decided to sleep it off, but by morning her symptoms were sadly worse. And that morning her husband Bill dropped her off at the emergency room. Yoder was admitted to the hospital, and, doctors began running a series of tests trying to figure out what was making her so ill. And at this point, she had been sick over 24 hours. That evening, she tried to get up in her hospital room, and she ended up collapsing in the room, and so she was then admitted to the ICU, and she quickly deteriorated in the ICU after that. The following morning, Mary suffered her first heart attack, and tragically, she had 7 more heart attacks between the morning and afternoon, when the last one in the afternoon ended up killing her. Just 48 hours after leaving her office, on July 22, 2015, Mary Yoder was pronounced deceased, and her doctors were at a loss. Since she died in the hospital, they routinely do an autopsy, which they did, and they began to look at the slides from the autopsy of her tissues and organs, and it, showed that they had been heavily under attack prior to her death. This to them told them that it was basically, this was poisoning of some sort. So the medical examiner, got in contact with poison control to help them out, and they tested, Mary Yoder's body for common arsenics and poisons and what have you, but the results all came back negative. So 2 months goes by now, and a chemist at the poison control office ends up getting a positive hit of what it may have been. They found that Mary passed from colchicine. Now, colchicine is, when used properly, an effective medicine for treating gout, which is a condition of inflammation of the joints. But if you don't have gout, just a little bit of this, the organs can shut down or kill you. Colchicine toxicity causes fever, abdominal cramping, and vomiting, all of which Mary had. And basically, all the liquids leave your body. Now that they knew the substance that killed her, investigators had to figure out, what the heck happened here? How did she even get this in her system? I mean, she did have an herb garden, and she did take herbs from that garden, and, she also took supplements, so they wanted to look at, of course, the supplements, because they were like, is there any contamination? So they kind of collected them all and sent them off to be tested, but the results came back that none of them were contaminated. So, they figured this is an accident. This wasn't like, oops, there was like, cross-contamination of some sort, and they spoke with the family, and the family were, insistent that this was not a suicide. So they ruled that out after talking with family and friends. So this, left just one option. Somebody had to murder her, right? Her murder ends up being ruled as a homicide. And now they had to find out, like, okay, who the heck wanted Maryyoder dead? By all accounts, she was a very beloved mom, wife, chiropractor, etc., so it just wasn't making any sense that anybody would want to harm her. Now, of course, like in most cases, the first person they're going to consider is the closest person to her, which would be Bill Yoder, her husband. And on the day that she actually got ill at the office, her husband, who was typically present and at work, was not. He was not. They didn't have much information about where Bill was that day, other than, he wasn't at work. Nothing really confirmed that at first to them. Now, not long after Maryyoder died, it was reported that Bill was dating one of her sisters. Now, this is not the sister who's fighting for Kaitlyn Conley. This is another sister. However, a neighbor of the sister said that she had seen the two, Bill and the sister, outside of her home together, embracing and kissing prior to Mary's death. But Bill and the sister claim it began after Mary passed. Now, this neighbor did testify in court that she had seen them together prior to Mary's death. Okay, but Bill and the sister completely denied this. I actually don't know if Bill and the sister are still together to this day, 6 years later, but I'm going to look into that because I'm really curious. I'll let you decide what you believe. Was he having an affair with the sister prior to her death, or was it, after she had passed away? And as we go through this, you can figure what you believe. So at this point, they did consider, with this information, like, Bill wasn't at work, and he's dating her sister now, so this is weird. So, of course, they're going to have Bill as, like, their primary suspect. But then, later in the case, Bill was given immunity. Absolutely. He was given immunity. And Bill wasn't the only one. So was her son, Adam. And both men, and this is not an accusation, this is, in my opinion, okay, both of them, and again, you'll see this as we go along in this series, had motive. They did. The one who is in prison, the DA pushed a motive that just was such a reach. My God. It was just so out there, so ridiculous, so... it was probably one of the worst motives that I've heard a DA push. It was just like, so, what? That doesn't even add up. But, regardless, Kaitlyn ended up being convicted of the crime, and she's the one sitting in a prison cell, and Bill and Adam were given immunity, which is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. This part of the story just, I was blown away. I just couldn't believe it. Now, this is a quote from the Free Kaitlyn Conley Facebook page. Quote, Bill Yoder and Adam Yoder were both granted immunity by testifying at a grand jury hearing. The investigation started out with 3 possible suspects, Bill Yoder, Adam Yoder, and Kaitlyn Conley. With two of the 3 suspects granted immunity, it isn't hard to believe that the prosecution was now adamant that they would try to get a conviction of Katie in any way possible. Those 2 were granted immunity before they even had the computers, this is crazy, from the Yoder home turned in. A thorough investigation wasn't complete when they gave 2 main individual's immunity, unquote. So yeah, really interesting stuff here. We have a 28-year-old girl sitting in a prison cell. Up until this point, she was living a very full, successful life, animals, entrepreneur, art business, working at a chiropractic clinic, going to college, 4.0 GPA, she was a dancer, she was all these things, tennis player, and then she's now sitting in a jail cell at 28 years old. Really crazy, tragic story. So I'm going to leave you hanging there for now. But we're going to get into it, and we're going to get into how she became, a suspect or, was brought to the police's attention. We're going to talk about some of the evidence they try to use in court to paint her as this, vicious, horrible, manipulative, devious murderer. What they claim the motive was, why Bill and Adam would have a motive, but were given immunity, and so on and so forth. I don't know how long the series will be. I know about the story. I know the basics of the story. I just have to, of course, research it, make sure what I'm saying is accurate, because I want to be factual, and we're going to discuss it. And I will bring you more soon, so hang tight. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.